Here we go.
Well, hello there, you amazing, beautiful, wonderful people. I hope you are all well on this thirsty Thursday. That's it. It's Thursday, and this is video 2 of possibly 3. I'm not here. This is just a mirage. I'm actually at, well, I'll tell you later. I'll tell you later. I'm not here. Pretend that I'm not here. Anyway, let's get straight into the meat and potatoes. As the other day, we spoke... Oh, and by the way, you're looking absolutely amazing. But anyway, straight into the meat and potatoes. We spoke the other day about Xana Kernodle and the fact that Xana Kernodle's aunt had apparently come out, and she had said that Xana, her family, had been told by law enforcement that she was the first one to be attacked on the night of the horrendous atrocity that was the Idaho 4 killings. Now, it received mixed feedback because some people were like, oh, why some rando is saying this when we know that this wasn't the order. We've been told what the order was. We haven't been told what the order was at all. The documentation came out, and obviously that is listing the names, but we could, and I think a lot of us did, assume that that was the order with which things happened. But ultimately, I've looked into the background of this individual who claimed to be Xana Kernodle's aunt, and from what I can see, she is absolutely Xana Kernodle's aunt. And other people had also reached out to me and said that they could remember when this was very first posted, and she received quite a lot of backlash from people who were arguing the point. But look, why is this even important? Why is it important? It's important because, as you can see, if you go back over that video from a couple of days ago, a lot of people have pointed out about Steve Gonsalves, for instance, the fact that Steve Gonsalves had said they didn't have to go upstairs. For a start off, he said they didn't have to go upstairs. Now, he could have just been using that word and there was nothing to read more into it, but he could have been saying they because he was led to believe or believed that this was done by more than one person. And we have consistently heard little things, little details, and we know the devil's in the detail, that would allude to perhaps there being multiple perpetrators. The injuries didn't match, for instance, is one of them. It's a huge kind of red flag. I had done a video a long time ago speaking about the use of the K-bar knife, and if you are someone who is very, very familiar with that knife is a combat weapon, and there are multiple ways to use it, and it could produce different injuries and would therefore give you different injury patterns. But it could also mean that there was different weapons, there was multiple weapons. We only believe it's a K-bar knife because we've been told there was a K-bar knife at the scene of the crime, but we don't have a murder weapon. And just as a side note, someone did reach out and said, did they even search for the weapon? You know, they seem to believe that Brian Kohberger took this specific route back from Moscow, Idaho, back to, Washington. And did they ever take the time to go and actually traverse this area and take this route and hunt for potential areas where this weapon and what his kill kit, what his bloody clothes could have been dumped off? Because look, there was nothing in Brian Kohberger's car, not a thing, not a single thing was found in his car. It's horrendous crime. Horrendous. And you can only imagine the carnage that was in this house, but not one thing. And we have this seemingly being suggested there was potentially a naked man running from the property. Now, I will say that somebody reached out to me the other day and they said that Ann Taylor is apparently reaching out to some astrology students. Now, I haven't seen that myself. You can tell me down below if this is true, and you can tell me where this is said. But it's strange because it was this naked person running was originally sort of brought into the arena, if you like, by, I believe they were astrology students. They were students who were filming the night sky, and they had said that they'd caught somebody naked running from 1122 King Road on the night of the crime. That person was subsequently very quickly reprimanded, removed, and that post was taken down from their online Facebook group. And again, this was really in the early stages. But anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. Point being, there's a lot of things that point to multiple perpetrators. And then we have this DNA, not the knife sheath DNA. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the other DNA. The DNA that would seem to suggest that there's at least 3 other individuals and there's blood at the property, both inside the property and on a glove outside the property, that is being ignored, being hidden, being buried. Much like the murder scene that was knocked down and subsequently buried. Why would you bury it? Because you want it buried. And why would you want it buried? Because there could be something that could later come to light. That's my thought process. I could be wrong. What do I know? But with respect to Xana Kernodle, why is it important if she was first? Because we know that Xana and Ethan had been involved in an altercation earlier on in the night. Seemingly bad enough that Xana Kernodle's father was contemplating coming over. Why would he contemplate coming over only to be stopped by the fact that he'd been drinking if this fight was not significant? Not significant enough to come over. We also know that Xana had had her lock fixed on her door in the lead up to this crime as well. Now, it could have just been that the door lock was broken. She wanted the door lock fixed because her and Ethan, maybe they were doing stuff and they didn't want people to walk in. Maybe they'd had issues at the property, stuff going missing perhaps, and they wanted to protect their belongings. Who knows? Point being, there seems to be some things happening around Xana. A fight, a lock change, and off the back end of that on the peripheral, we do have activity with her mum, Cara Northington. And look, this isn't about, I'm not trying to make, like someone said, you can't blame Xana. This isn't about blaming Xana at all. This is about understanding what happened and why it happened and who did it, because I don't believe Brian Kohberger did it. And if Brian Kohberger didn't do it, someone else did it. Now, some people are leaning very hard on the narcotics. Some people believe, like myself, that there was a high probability that this was something to do with the fraternities and the sororities. I can't help but think it, and I can't help but think it because there's so many things that point towards it, and that is the aforementioned other DNA that's seemingly being protected. Why would they want to protect the DNA? And I spoke yesterday about the Lucy Letby case. Now, Lucy Letby, currently in prison for multiple murders, and specialists have now come out basically saying she didn't murder anyone. And in fact, some of her victims died of natural causes. And it's very, very possible that she was thrown under the bus to protect the institution, if you like, to protect them from coming under the spotlight. Because what could have happened then? These are just things that we know about. If the spotlight rarely does come on, do we find out that multiple deaths have happened over the last few years? And do we then have a subsequent huge legal case against a hospital where multiple peoples learn that their families and friends and loved ones died at the hands of a hospital that weren't capable of doing things right? So was it easier to throw Lucy Letby under the bus and take the heat off the hospital? And much like in the Idaho 4 case, again, I've mentioned this multiple times, and that is that the University of Idaho is the driving force of this entire area. And they are in the process of acquiring the Phoenix University, upwards north of $500 million. That's a lot of money. And I've said this before, people will kill for a $10 vape. So what are they willing to do for $500 million? Are they willing to formulate a varying story rather than let it be known that there are things going on within the University of Idaho that are so horrendous that they can lead to death? And we have heard other statements from Steve Gonsalves about the things that are happening around this case, perhaps not being truly about the justice for the victims of this crime, but there's business decisions that are interfering with things. Do you know what I mean? And we spoke yesterday as well about the fact that Brian Kohberger, it don't even seem that he was at the property. And when he was around this area, this 12 times that they tried to push a stalking narrative, he was in fact doing other things that the prosecution were well aware of what he was doing. They knew exactly where he was, when he was, how he was. But they wanted it to look a certain way. But with respect to Xana Kernodle, I do. It's important to understand 100% whether she was indeed the first person or not, because it changed the entire dynamic of this crime. It brings into question Dylan Mortensen and what she actually saw, because it doesn't make any sense that she seems to suggest that Brian Koberger, the killer, is walking from Xana and Ethan, goes past her and heads towards the sliding door, as if to leave the property, when in fact if he'd have gone there first and then gone upstairs, you'd have seen him coming back from the opposite direction down the stairs. So it does change the dynamic. And when you take into consideration that the prosecution themselves have just made out that Dylan Mortensen just isn't credible because she can't really remember things, it does leave you the question of why would you discredit your own witness, who was the foundation of a lot of what was brought towards Brian Koberger. And off the back end of that, you have Bethany Funk, who seemingly has a different rendition of what happened that likely contradicts what Dylan Mortensen said, and she's being hid and shielded from the defence team. Who knows? But yeah, it is important. It's important because who was the target in the property kind of leads you to think about how this went forward and who was truly the target and why. Because Madison Mogan, for a long time, we believed her was the target because it made the most sense. She lived at the property. Kaylee Gonsalves didn't live there. She was just on there on the off chance. Same as Ethan Chapin. He didn't live there. He was just staying there with his girlfriend. Xana Kernodle could have potentially led people to think why, and then learn about Cara Northington, and then think, hold on a second, what's going on here? But Madison Mogan, and when they're pushing the stalking aspect and this kind of version of events, things start to make more sense with Brian Koberger, because it's the love-struck puppy, seeing someone from a distance, and if I can't have you, no one's going to have your narrative. But if Madison Mogan weren't first, Kaylee Gonsalves weren't first, but Xana Kernodle was first, then it changes the dynamic of the crime itself. And it does then feed into other narratives that we have, primarily the narcotics and the frat theory. And again, it does push you in both of them directions. I fully appreciate those who really do feel that this is a narcotic situation. It can't be taken off the table. But if it's a narcotic situation, then why are they burying the DNA samples within the house? Why are they being buried? Because to me, the only reason you would bury it is if the people who are in there are known and potentially powerful and could lead back to potentially the college, the university. And they don't want that. They don't want this connected to this town. It had to be an outsider. It had to be someone from away to take the blame away from this area, take the heat off. It's just my thoughts and feelings. Feelings aren't fact, but there's a lot of things around this case that do point you in certain directions. Where are you at this stage? Let me know down below, and I'll catch you all either later on today or tomorrow. Mwah.